I'd like to welcome soon-to-be Dr. Susanna French from ANU. And her topic, which resonates for me and certainly for a lot of other people, I'm sure, navigating inclusivity on a shoestring, casual convenorship and the UDL implementation. So welcome, Susanna.
Hi. Welcome, everyone. It's great to be here. I'm glad the Ritalin's kicked in so I can still pay attention and still have the energy. And I really appreciate ADCET for reserving the sensory room. So I wasn't a bundle of nerves and nonsense before doing this. So thank you all for coming. I know it's a bit of a slog trying to do this like at 3 in the afternoon when you want to have a nap. Honestly, same. So yeah, first acknowledgement of country. So I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today. So the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and acknowledge their continuing connection to land, waters, and culture. I would also like to acknowledge the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people, the traditional custodians of the land on which I live and work in Canberra. And I pay my respect to their elders past, present and emerging, and also extend that respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, Islander peoples present today. So as you can kind of guess from the title, a lot of us have probably worked in a casual capacity as well, and you could probably relate to it. So I don't mean to upset and trigger everyone, but as we are aware, we're all aware of those dual pressures of that administrative bureaucracy and that imperative to provide high quality, inclusive education. And it's for like a lot of diverse student cohorts and a lot of intersecting issues that don't necessarily work well. So you can't exactly cater to everyone. So I look into the complexity. So I didn't even know what a UDL was when I started teaching in 2014, but I always tried to make sure like, okay, what would I have liked as a student, and just taking on the feedback as I go. So but there are also a lot of difficulties in trying to implement that. So when we think about UDL's inclusive strategies, so the multiple means of engagement, representation and action with those rigid frameworks of the administrative bureaucracy. So it's just this very precarious balance that we're trying to strike between fulfilling those institutional expectations and meeting the students' needs. So what I'll be doing today is I'll be discussing a little bit more broadly on the context of casual work. Yes, just as a, what? I would like to move the slide. Oh, yeah. Oh, cool. Yeah, cool. Yeah, because it wasn't. All right, I didn't push it hard enough. So yeah, so this is, so a lot of this is based on some of the feelings that I've had, some of the things I try to do. I also will get into some of the activities I was able to implement, but also just to be clear that not all of them are going to be best practice, but this is what we had at the time as well. So just a bit about me. So I recently submitted my PhD in sociology. It was about the female experience of autism. So only slightly autobiographical. And I actually got diagnosed while I was doing it. While I was doing the thesis. So I have a whole chapter about my diagnostic experience as a sociologist and as a patient, and also feeling like I can go toe-to-toe with another academic person. So that was really interesting. And it's also my privilege that a lot of people can't exactly do or question it, or even think they can question it. So I've been previously employed as a sessional lecturer and tutor. So I started tutoring in 2014, started actually lecturing in 2018, and I stopped all that in 2022. And I'm now working as a project support officer and with the Inclusive Communities team with the University Experience Division at ANU. So pretty much my motivation for getting that job was that, oh, cool, I can earn a lot more money and work only half as hard, and And yeah, why the hell not? And yeah, but then people keep asking, oh, Susanna, you were so good. Are you going to go back to teaching? And I'm like, no, there's no incentive. You're happy to give me teaching awards, but you don't want to give me a permanent job. This is your own damn fault. And you lost a really good lecturer as a result. So that's the kind of argument we can make. It's like you lose good staff if you don't look after them. So I was 30 years old, so that's way too old to find out that I actually have a particular neurotype, and I paid $4,000 for the privilege. And I've also got many things to say about being a neurodivergent casual, but I won't get into this right now. We can discuss that over questions or something. Also, there's always one person in the room, and I'm sorry this looks like it was made for ants. I really was trying to make sure, but I will talk through it. So we always get this person, there's always one person in the room, and I would like to stop this right now because it's like, oh, but the casual loading is meant to cover sick leave, as if that is the best insight they could ever come up with. And it's absolutely unhelpful. So honestly, we would really like you to be quiet, and that is the most sanitized, censored way I could think about it. Because, and the reason why we want you to, rather than getting aggressive, is because you've got to think about what the reality is for most people on a casual basis. So they're more likely to be renters. They're more likely to be working like multiple jobs as well, just to kind of make maybe one pathetic full-time job. There was one semester 2, 2018, I worked 4 different casual jobs at the same time. And that is absolutely disgusting that I was doing it. Luckily, I enjoyed the work I was doing because one of them happened to be a really cool advocacy role, but anyway, it was just way too much. And there's also like, you can't exactly afford to take time off work. You've really got to budget it. And so this would end up, you end up with the result that a lot of people will rather come to work sick than risk no job at all. And that was, things have changed with COVID, I guess, but not all institutions are implementing that casuals can get sick leave. And of course, we all know tertiary education, they have become increasingly reliant on casual and fixed term contracts. So making full-time work a very rare and valuable asset. So I had my privilege to be able to get through to that interview and actually, get the current job that I did. And now I'm just trying to kind of broaden my things now that the PhD is submitted. And also, even if you do have a PhD qualification, it's still that feeling, not everyone maybe feel that way, and good for you if that's so. But, you're still treated at the lowest status compared to tenured and permanent staff. And often they're not the best people who understand how to run a damn class anyway. So if there's a conflict between 2 experts, the casual's probably going to be more worried at risk of job loss, despite their knowledge and qualifications. And then being on that perpetual casual basis, it makes it hard for me to put the brakes, it puts a lot of brakes on, like with life planning and all of that. Like if I wanted to have a baby, I don't get maternity leave. I don't get money over the Christmas break. I can't even, it's like rental, getting a mortgage or a rental place can also be challenging as well. And of course, not being invited to staff meetings and facing financial pressures when you don't get paid over that period as well. And so all of these things, they actually do cause negative psychosocial health consequences. And if you are working on your mental health strategies at your institutions, you really need to be paying attention to this. And yet, even despite being so stretched thin, there is still an expectation because ANU likes to say that they are the number 1, although we're number 4, whatever. But there's still that expectation to provide a premium education to your students so they can be the thought leaders that we can put on their posters. So we also really need to think about what jobs actually should be casualized, and if you're actually going to create, good career development for new students, or are you just going to, shove that work to an already overworked academic as well. So they got a few mismatched expectations with the UDL and casual convenorship. So, it's supposed to be, UDL is supposed to be the gold standard in higher education, but there does seem to be a bit of an oversight in UDL training, whether intentionally or not, at least that's my reflections of it, is that there seems to be an assumption that we can implement more, that those who can implement these inclusive practices have the time and resources. And judging from the presentations I've heard today, it's not, we are all very aware how time poor we are, and it's like, and while this challenge, of course, affects all academics, they still, and it also, like, we have to think about how institutions and tenured staff have to set the standard. But to be honest, it's the casuals who end up actually doing a lot of the innovative work for their tutors. So, there's been times like off hours that I'd be trying to get my head around, like, oh, how am I going to make this theory, this really complicated theory, accessible to a bunch of 18 and 19-year-olds who don't even know what a Karl Marx is? Like, it's, yeah. So, and you're assuming that they did their readings and that they came to the lectures as well. The other thing is, of course, there's the precarious conditions and there's that lack of time as well, where, and also we're only paid at least at ANU, only paid 2 hours of preparation per week. So when you would consider the time required to design a course, that's if you're not actually taking on somebody else's work, and research the topic, especially if it's an unfamiliar subdiscipline, like you sort of know it, but you don't know enough. So you still spend a lot of hours researching it and organizing the tutorials. So obviously the preparation time is insufficient, and hopefully to most of you in the room, this isn't new to you. So you can see that there is a significant amount of time, consumed by just the standard preparation tasks, leaving little room to meet those sort of demands for inclusivity. So, and you think about like other things I've done, like assessment moderation meetings, that takes up time, student meetings, like often one-on-one, we are always like almost on call, academic integrity meetings, when, you get people trying to be smart, being like, oh, but I wrote directly on my laptop this time. I usually handwrite. I'm like, oh, okay, that's a nice fairy tale you gave me. And you still have to be very nice about it and be like, well, if I got caught out, I'd lose my PhD. So, we all got to set a standard at some point. And the other thing is that that's kind of really shitting me and should shit everybody else, is that university administrations often take advantage of the fact that many casual academics genuinely want to do well. And, we want our students to like us. We aim for good evaluations. And then many of us also then become trapped in that cycle of casualization. And we try to stay, go above and beyond to stay up to date and engage with, how can we best get students to engage with complex course content. But the reality is we don't earn enough to justify all this extra work, and we're often doing it all by ourselves. And many of us are working, again, like I said earlier, additional jobs to supplement that income from casual teaching. And also you think about if you're a PhD, you also got to think about your thesis and your milestones as well. And so, yeah, ultimately, what I would say that it is incredibly unfair and unreasonable to rely solely on the initiative and goodwill of individual conveners to provide students with a premium inclusive education. And there needs to be institutional support, like actual proper institutional support that's not just fucking around with your terms of references to actually do it. So but there are some sustainable ways that I've managed to do it. And of course, just a caveat with the lockdowns, so students, particularly those who've had chronic conditions or disabilities, or just generally have a lot going on, like they might not even tell me, but it was like, oh, they would love to have hybrid classes because some of them are working too. Youth allowance doesn't pay anywhere near enough. So having those hybrid classes would have been great, but it's like, well, these rooms are not fit for purpose to do this properly. It's like I could either do online or I could do in person, but there was no way I could do both. And it's like you could hear me fine, on the microphone, but there's no, but if you want to hear the discussion, you're not going to be able to hear anything. And those discussions need to flow. They need to, rather than thinking, oh no, I've got to get up on the podium so someone on the other end can listen to me as well. And so so the physical space is just really inadequate a lot of the time, and it's taking a while. So these are just case studies of best practice of inclusive tutorial activity design that I've done. Unfortunately, I'm not going to get into assessments because there's just not enough time, and I'm already worried that we're going to go over time anyway. But I just want to be very clear that I am not expecting you to understand these theories. Even now, I'm trying to dilute the theory as much as I can, so I'm not alienating my audience. but it was just kind of to see the point is to see how these UDL principles, you know, even when you're like, you've got like literally no money or resources to do it, can make complex theory a bit more accessible to first year sociology students. So I'm really sorry, I didn't expect it to be so blurry, but it was just kind of, so what we did, so we modeled Durkheim. So he's kind of considered the father of sociology with his functionalist theory, and he's got, so he's got like two different kinds of solidarity he talks about. So I kind of have the cats to kind of give you an idea. But yeah, so pretty much with these sort of solidarity. So all you really need to know about mechanical solidarity, it's usually traditional pre-modern societies, and it's characterized by homogeneity and shared values. And it's like, and that uniformity, so people perform similar roles. You could probably think of a few examples of that. And then there's a very strong collective consciousness, so deviations are very harshly punished. Whereas with the organic solidarity, the modern societies, so they're usually more modern, and it's marked by that specialization and interdependence. So it's not just if you were born in a family of bakers, that is all you will be. It's like, oh, I could be a surgeon, even though my daddy's a baker. Oh, 5 more minutes already. So let's just get on with it. So this is just kind of what we did. So I got one lot to make a bug, another lot to, with follow the instructions. And this is kind of what we did. So this one was the little was the one that was organic. The other one that was mechanical as well. So we did discuss a bit about the feedback as well. So some, of course, they were responded to it being very stressful, but it was good to kind of gauge these reactions as well. And the slides will be up too. So some thought, like really didn't like following instructions. It was way too stringent. Some people, would just do their own thing. And we actually had room to discuss this as well. And the slides are up there. We also had the Goffman spy game. So kind of getting people to understand all about Goffman and just how people put on a bit of a front or how they perform. And so a really tangible thing would be to do the spy game. And there were just a few other post-game reflections as well, and just getting them to think about how do they manage themselves as well, rather than just reading a bunch of like texts that were probably translated 50 years ago. It just actually made it a bit more meaningful to students. And of course, the Curie IQ test, understanding that how in something like intelligence, thinking you're taken for granted that it's something you either have or you don't. Actually kind of understanding the cultural and social construction of it, especially with the Curie IQ test as well. So something that was cute, where it's like most students knew who Deborah Mailman was if they watched Play School, or they knew The Secret Life of Us, and that she wasn't a postal worker. But if you didn't come from this country, you're not going to know who Deborah Mailman is. So most students scored very low, and kind of discussed that, and we discussed that arbitrary nature of intelligence and how that feeds into the social construction of racism. So these are some honorable mentions as well, and we can talk a bit about that later. As you could see that there were for the multiple means of engagement, diverse reactions. It showed that need for multiple engagement strategies, structured guidelines, all of that. With Goffman, there was a lot more autonomy in choosing deception, and also increased engagement. Curie, we also discussed how like culturally relevant content. So we don't just take for granted the same things all the time. With the representation, again, we try to accommodate different learning styles, trying to accommodate diverse knowledge as well too. And multiple means of action and expression. So there was a bit of freedom and flexibility in how tasks were approached, because I wanted to know their feelings of it, and then distilling those feelings and applying it to theory directly. So then they understood what on earth they're actually reading. I've got a great video, but we don't have a lot of time, but it's literally RuPaul. You don't need to ring the bell. The wheel's fine. So pretty much like, look, when you don't have a lot of time and you've already got a lot of good content, it is important to kind of take on the resources. But I do understand that this isn't, but this is what got me through. So it was kind of like, okay, we have our own informal communities of practice about what is actually good practice, actually discussing this informally, but we all do this all ourselves, And it saved a lot of mental load, but it was also like, it seemed that the institution is still relying on mostly PhD students to kind of do this as well. And kind of just let's think about like why it is unacceptable to keep this work casual. So you can't really justify this idea that you want this premium and accessible teaching, especially if you want to be a standard bearer of equity and inclusion. But if you're so under, if your staff are so under-resourced and under-supported, and honestly, if I was paid for the whole year, I would be at level B academic, and that's a lot of money. That's a huge difference. So I'd see my tax, the income I got taxed on, and it was 50 grand for all the work I was doing and how much I was doing for free. And a level B academic is over 100K. So, we really need to think about that. Please do not just cut out the casual staff and just dump it onto other people. But ANU have they've done something right. Is that they've approved their new enterprise agreement that casual staff are now entitled to sick leave, annual leave, and long service leave. Unfortunately, it's not a they can't do it in retrospect for the long service leave. So after all those years of casual teaching, no, don't see it. And very rarely does casual conversion happen. So I really would recommend that you look through my slides if you ever do, but I've also got the recommended resources as well. So you know where at least I got my information and built on that. And this is all the list of people that I would like to thank, whether they were mentors or teaching comrades. So that we had a lot to discuss as well. But yeah, I think that's it. Are there any questions? I'm happy to go further on some of these. And I'm sorry for the foul mouth, but it's been a day. So yeah.
Susanna, look, we won't have time for questions because we've got the panel session going on now. But can I just say big thank you for your presentation. At CQU, a casual academic is going to get a lot more support from me because I know the difference as a learning designer in terms of workload. So thank you for sharing your perspective and your experiences about that.